What is up, everybody? Game of Thrones Season 7 review. Unfortunately, I don't have a native English accent, so I can't make an incredible Game of Thrones review as other people can, because when they have an accent, they can talk about pretty much anything, and it sounds really official, really Game of Thrones official. But anyways, let's get into it. I love me some Game of Thrones, I really do. Overall, I enjoyed Season 7, but I think there were several big problems with the storyline, and I want to talk about those problems in this video. The pacing was very rushed at times, which made the storytelling seem superficial. The producers wanted to finish this series off with such haste that the storytelling itself seemed very different than past seasons. Their reasoning was that they didn't want to drag everything out just for money and reduce the wildly popular series to a watered-down version of itself. I think they accomplished the same negative result by speeding things up too much. This season was all about action and little in the way of everything else. Everything else, including everything else that we really like about this entire story. Given where they took the plot this season and knowing they will conclude everything in the next and final season of the series, which is really sad just to think about, I think it's safe to say they could have easily taken Game of Thrones to 9 or 10 seasons, fleshed out certain plot lines, and given the fans more lore. There are so many aspects of the Game of Thrones universe that would have been very interesting to see expanded on. At the end of Season 7, we still know next to nothing about the White Walkers, what the Night King wants, and countless topics that people routinely make videos about. It seems like the show decided not to touch on the many interesting aspects of this unique magical world in order to just steamroll through the central storyline by way of action and light speed travel. As has been pointed out repeatedly, the travel time in Season 7 was absurdly fast. I'm all for moving plot points along by shortening travel time, but it seemed excessive and ridiculous at times. One of the best aspects of the Game of Thrones experience is the continuous tension building with the occasional payoff here and there. But when you can zip around the world scene to scene and send ravens like text messages, it diminishes any buildup. The most absurd thing to me this season was Jon Snow and company going north of the Wall to capture an undead creature to take back to Cersei. The rescue by Daenerys was also clumsy at best and fairly ridiculous at worst. None of the major events in Episode 6 made much sense. It's worth noting that I still enjoyed Episode 6 despite its absurdity because of all the characters, Game of Thrones universe, etc. Almost anything would have been enjoyable to watch, but it was still poorly written. Oddly enough, the person who proposed the whole idea was Tyrion, who should know more than anyone else what a futile attempt it would be to convince Cersei to do anything for the greater good. Then Jon Snow, King of the North, decides to lead an expedition of a few men north of the Wall, even though Bran said he saw the entire army of the undead gathering near their point of entry. So basically, Jon was going to head towards the entire army of the undead with only a few people for a goal that seemed to have a very low likelihood of paying off in the end. The expedition beyond the Wall would have made more sense if they needed to find an essential artifact or there was some lore-based reason to go beyond the Wall. Possibly through some information Sam passed to them, who knows. If they wanted to deliver a dragon to the Night King and have these characters and Daenerys interact with the Night King and his army, they could have arranged it for more believable reasons. If they really wanted to force a later meeting with Cersei, the group could have incidentally taken a white as prisoner to prove that the army of the undead is real. The same white could have mobilized the North to a higher degree as well. On the way to the danger zone, Jon decides to do the honorable thing and offer Longclaw his Valyrian steel sword to Jorah after they had already crossed the wall. Considering how dangerous this suicide mission was to begin with, it made zero sense to offer his powerful weapon to Jorah at a time when he couldn't get a weapon of his choosing to replace it. The entire situation with the army of the undead surrounding Jon and company made little sense. Later on in the episode, we saw how far the Night King could throw his ice spear javelin thing, but he didn't want to throw anything at a group of sitting ducks that his entire operation was focused on. But then when the undead soldiers realized the lake was solid again so they could get to their targets, what chance would Jon and company have of fending them off? None, quite frankly. The show decided to make the whites walk at a snail's pace when it suited their purpose and make them move fast at other times. Even if the whites were crawling towards Jon and friends, the sheer number of undead soldiers would have swarmed and swallowed them with ease. It's not like the band of merry men were defending a choke point. They were surrounded 360 degrees by an enormous number of enemies. The entire fighting sequence made no sense at all. What's more is that the Night King and his elite guard could have easily attacked as well, but they just sat back. Also, the Night King seems to be quite smart, unlike his foot soldiers, so why was he waiting on them to figure out that the lake was solid in the first place? Shouldn't he have been able to know that, sense that, figure it out in some way? And suddenly, when all hope was lost, Daenerys swoops in to save the day. So Gendry was able to sprint back to Eastwatch, they were able to send ravens to Dragonstone, and Daenerys was able to make it all the way back within 1 to 2 days tops. Even if you're willing to say that dragons can fly incredibly fast and can somehow sense exactly where Jon is, what about how long it would take Gendry to run to Eastwatch and to then have the ravens fly all the way to Dragonstone? Just doesn't seem possible. Why didn't the expedition group take a raven or two to send back to Eastwatch in the case of an emergency? Or why didn't they coordinate with Bran to have him watching them in real time via some ravens? So Daenerys swoops in at the last second and her dragons start tearing shit up. Drogon lands right in front of the Night King and Jon decides to fight off whites for days. I could understand if he had to attack a few whites to let his companions get on the dragon, but he just wanders off fighting like it ain't nothing wrong. Meanwhile, Night King Bro grabs an ice lance, spear, javelin of instant dragon death, and instead of hurling it at Drogon and grounding all those pesky meddling kids, he chucks it at a flying dragon high in the sky. And of course he nails it in one hit, no problem. Fast forward to Jon climbing out of the water. Instead of just keeping still while the undead trudge off to parts unknown, he gets to his fate and makes a ruckus and acts like he's going to take his last stand. I know he was probably super cold laying there on the ice, but either way, he seemed to be in a really bad predicament. Why not take his chances freezing a little bit longer rather than freezing plus fighting an entire army of the undead by himself? Of course, Benjen swoops in at exactly the right time. 2 perfectly timed saves in 1 episode. Benjen's entire mysterious disappearance and reappearance as a changed being was just to save Bran and leave, and then just to save Jon and leave and die. So Benjen was really just an extra life for them when they came north of the wall. That's convenient. The entire drama between Sansa and Arya also seemed weird. The simplest way to put it is that it was really poorly written. Even if they wanted to build suspense leading to a final confrontation with Lord Baelish, the storyline had no flow. Not to mention, they really did Littlefinger dirty in season 7. Littlefinger was supposed to be one of the most cunning men in all of Westeros. In season 7, he wasn't much of a conniver, even though Sansa kept signaling she was at odds with him. That didn't faze him. He kept trying to woo her, and she kept being snarky. They could have still had the Starks triumph over him at the end of season 7, but it wasn't the same Littlefinger we came to know through the course of the show. They made Varys useless as well. These two characters were supposed to be among the best and brightest, considering they were self-made men, but the show turned them into glorified props. Bran's character really took a turn for the worse in season 7. Okay, I get it. He's the three-eyed raven. He knows everything, so he's a weirdo now. But does that mean he should become an unfeeling, creepy robot? Blood Raven seemed way more normal than him. Arguably, Bran just turned into the three-eyed raven, so maybe he's overwhelmed at the moment. Still, they turned a character that the audience liked into another tool that exists purely to fill in the blanks of the plotline. They could have kept him weird, but still made him likable or empathetic. It also was odd that he wasn't divulging any information to all the people around him to do whatever they could to stop the impending wrath of the Night King. Instead, the main thing he wants to do at the end of the last episode of this season is to tell Jon who his parents were. Maybe Jon's lineage has something to do with the Night King, who knows, but it just seems like you have a character here with all this information that would be very, very valuable to all of the people facing the Night King, and he's really just sitting, staring into fires, looking at trees, not really doing much in the way of mobilizing the people around him. The casting for Rhaegar was a major letdown. Rhaegar was supposed to be the stud of all studs, and the guy they casted in that role doesn't even lift, like not even once. Not even close to the natty limits. He never even got his beginner gains. At the very least, he should have done GOMAD for a few weeks prior to filming. Okay, forget about his physique. The dude simply did not have the facial aesthetics we demand for Rhaegar Targaryen, and the wig he wore was absolutely revolting. All apologies to the actor they got, but he looked like a marginally more manly version of Viserys. So not very manly, not even at all. Rhaegar was supposed to be epic AF high key, but that dude wasn't even low key mildly to be saluted. Not now, not never. Sad. It's like everything we ever heard about Rhaegar was fake news. We were told Rhaegar was doing a phenomenal job, had graduated at the top of his class from UPenn, and made fantastic buildings all around the world, but instead he was just that dude. They built Rhaegar up so much you couldn't fathom how Robert Baratheon defeated him, and then you saw the guy and you're like, okay, I guess I know how he defeated him. It was just a major letdown, let's just put it that way. And on the Rhaegar tip, they did not have to do a voiceover explaining how Jon is Daenerys' nephew while they were engaging in epic boat sessy time. They made things so much grosser than it had to be. As fans of Game of Thrones, we're a bit numb to incest in Westeros. After witnessing the Lannister twins go at it season after season, we even know about how the Targaryens get down. They have a rich history of incestuous relations. But do we need it neatly laid out by creepy robot boy who just went through puberty while Johnny boy and Danny girl are getting bucket naked in a nude on a boat? I think I speak for nearly all of humanity when I say we wanted to see these characters hook up, but by explaining it during the festivities, we were forced to focus on the grossest aspects of it. They might as well have had Bran say in his creepy way, "That is the nephew, that is the aunt, unholy, unholy, vomit now, gag now, etc. I'm still shipping them because Targaryens are allowed to do it because dragons and purple eyes. even though neither of them has purple eyes on the show. A lot of people are saying their baby will be the Song of Ice and Fire, but Jon is already the Song of Ice and Fire. Maybe he's the Song of Ice and Fire that leads to a better Song of Ice and Fire and Fire. I really hope in episode 1 of season 8, Bran has a flashback about how Daenerys is not really Jon's aunt. Maybe she's just a fourth cousin or something. Regardless, I'll still accept Jon and Daenerys together if they can stop Bran, the robotic creep master, from doing more voiceovers when they get busy. I've accepted the weird rules of Westeros for Westeros and dragons and stuff. Anyways, guys, those are my major critiques of this last season. As I said at the beginning of this video, I still enjoyed it, believe it or not, even with those critiques, because I like Game of Thrones, I like the characters, I like the universe. I don't think the writing was that great, especially in the end episodes of this season, but hey, there were still great visuals. It was still exciting. I'm still going to watch Game of Thrones. I'm still going to look forward to whatever they offer. I just wish it had been a little bit more believable. And I also wish they weren't in such a rush to end this series and had just taken their time a bit with things, because we love the action sequences, we love the payoffs, we love all that kind of stuff, but I think we also just love being immersed in this world and getting to look around and see, even if it's like small little things that are going on, small little subplots and whatnot. Anyways, guys, let me know what you thought about Season 7 in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.